Hey there guys, this is John Dixon, your host with another marvelous video this time. Leprechaun, franchise explored. Imagine returning home after a long day of work, you grab a couple of beers, settle down on the couch, and you are in desperate need of some quick entertainment. Surely, an Oscar-worthy flick for some timeless classic wouldn't be on your mind. As good as these content-driven movies are, we do not need a slice of cheap thrills. The guilty pleasures that put a smile on your face, especially in the hours of stress. That is exactly where movies like the Leprechaun franchise make their entry. Yes, these films are not horror classics, and they neither scare you nor leave you moved, but they offer the easy entertainment that we all crave for. And there is no shame in admitting that we all enjoy our share of such guilty pleasures. A nice juicy cheeseburger after days of eating the greens never hurt anyone. You have probably got a drift already, and this video is indeed dedicated to those who take their mindless entertainment seriously. We dive deep into the world of Leprechaun and bring you all the movies in the franchise, explored to the bone. Some are genuinely entertaining, some are trash, and some others are tolerable. But they all make sure that you have a hearty laugh and enjoy the antics of the demented little creature, the vile leprechaun in action. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Do you hear anything?
Leprechaun 1993. It all started from here, and this movie was another addition to the late 80s and early 90s stream of horror flicks that did not take themselves seriously. Written and directed by Mark Jones, this film not only introduced the horrors of the Leprechaun, but it also gifted us an actress who will go on to become a superstar in the years to come, Jennifer Aniston. The story begins in 1983 when a man named Dan O'Grady returns home after a trip to Ireland. During his travel, he got an opportunity to interrogate a leprechaun and stole a pot of gold from the evil creature. Back home, he buries the gold, but he soon realizes that the creature is still after his gold. The leprechaun murders his wife, but Dan manages to use a 4-leaf clover to trap him in a crate. Just as he is about to burn him, Dan suffers a stroke, and the story jumps 10 years down the line. J.D. Redding and his daughter Tori rent the same farmhouse, where it all happened with Dan O'Grady. While the contract workers are fixing the home, they accidentally end up freeing the leprechaun, and the gold-thirsty entity is back with a vengeance. The body count keeps rising, and the leprechaun is determined to kill anyone who stands between him and his gold. When the violence gets a bit too much to handle, they start trying to figure out ways to kill a leprechaun, and the same old technique of using a 4-leaf clover seems to be the key. Finally, the workers in the family find a 4-leaf clover, and it is shot into the leprechaun's mouth, which makes him melt away. He falls into a well, and the well is blown up with gasoline to end the menace for good. But just as you start thinking that the menace is over, the movie ends with the leprechaun vowing to come back for his gold once again.
Oh my God.
Terror comes in all sizes. The light-hearted, tongue-in-cheek horror flick would have been a lost cause had it not been for the brilliance of the cast. Warwick Davis owns the role of the leprechaun, and he is easily the best thing about the film. Even in the absence of a watertight script, he manages to be both creepy and amusing, and the cheesy lines justify the perfect appearance that was given to him. Jennifer Aniston shines in her debut, and the lack of extreme gore or fan service is compensated by some close-up shots of her running around. The makers initially wanted to turn this into an out-and-out horror flick, but Warwick Davis ensured that there is a generous dose of humor to go around. The violent dwarf, who is barely 3 feet tall, terrorizes everyone from grown men to cops, and the leprechaun deserves a credit for daring to brave the impossible. Make no mistake, there are a few genuine horror elements present in the narrative as well. As you can imagine, they never went big on the effects either. It was never meant to be taken seriously, and it is all about the amusing moment and the cheesy narrative. Say what you will, but the uproarious horror comedy will always be a part of our childhood and our comfort zone. When the days are rough, all we can say is, I want me some Leprechaun.
Splendid Canadian.
Leprechaun 2, 1994. Did you think that the leprechaun only lusts for his gold? Well, this time around, he is back looking for a bride, even though the gold still remains on his agenda. The narrative picks up 1,000 years ago in Ireland, where an evil leprechaun is celebrating his 1,000th birthday. He has a human slave named William O'Day, and he promises to free him after marrying his desired bride. To the shock of William, he finds out that the leprechaun has picked his daughter to be his bride. And the evil creature states that whenever the lady will sneeze 3 consecutive times without anyone saying "God bless you," she will be his forever. William manages to save his daughter by interrupting her sneeze sequence, but the leprechaun kills him and vows to marry one of his descendants on his next 1,000th birthday. We are back to present-day Los Angeles, and time has come for the leprechaun to fulfill his vows. It has been 1,000 years since the last appearance of the leprechaun, and we are introduced to Morty and his nephew Cody, who works as tour guides to scam the tourists. Cody's girlfriend Bridget turns out to be one of the descendants of William O'Day, and now the leprechaun is after her. Cody and his uncle Morty try their best to fight the demented leprechaun, and distracting him by misplacing his gold seems to buy them some valuable time. Eventually, it all boils down to a final face-off between Cody and the leprechaun, and he must use all the tricks in his bag to save his girlfriend from becoming the leprechaun's bride.
God bless you.
A typical 90s B horror sequel. There are some who seem to think that the sequel is actually more fun than the original, and they have their reasons. The direction changed hands, and Rodman Flender brought in some changes that we didn't mind at all. For starters, the plot is certainly better, and violence gets a lot nastier than before. Secondly, the absence of Jennifer Aniston is filled by the alluring Siobhan Durkin. It was supposed to go to Denise Richards, but we aren't unhappy with the end result. Another thing that we appreciate about Leprechaun 2 is that it toned down the cheesy, goofy bits to make it more like a typical horror flick about a sinister leprechaun. Warwick Davis is back with his magical performance one more time, and we love how his voice just complements the character. He is just made for this role, and he perfects his second performance as the sadistic leprechaun. We also love the cheesy action sequences, and watching an enraged leprechaun hunt down his targets was thoroughly entertaining. However, it has to be said that the movie did not do justice to a decent budget that was allocated. The effects are nowhere close to spectacular, and save for the amusing moments and some occasional scares, there is not much to take home. Overall, the trick is to overlook the flaws and love the hilarious bits that make the franchise so iconic. Once you do that, this will not seem like an inferior attempt at entertaining the audience, but an attempt to entertain with inferior content. We don't necessarily complain about the latter. Leprechaun 3, 1995. When the big screen releases fell miserably at the box office, there was only one way for the franchise to move ahead. Yes, you guessed it right. From the third movie in the series, the Leprechaun franchise took the direct-to-video route, and we would be lying if we said that the quality wasn't compromised. It begins when a pawn shop owner buys a strange statue of a leprechaun from a stranger who claims that it is a good luck charm. The seller warns him to never remove the golden medallion of the statue, but greed takes over, and the pawn shop owner takes it for himself. All of a sudden, the statue transforms into a dangerous leprechaun who would slaughter anyone that takes his gold. He goes on a killing spree in the casino in Las Vegas, and finally, it is up to Scott and his girlfriend Tammy to destroy the leprechaun for good. They use a flamethrower on his gold to destroy it, and this in turn makes the vile creature burst into flames. This enjoyable cheese fest is probably the best in the series. Say what you will, but this still turns out to be the highest grossing direct-to-video flick of 1995, and people certainly loved their share of guilty pleasures back in the day. In fact, despite being a direct-to-video flick, it made up for the lack of quality with good content. The veteran cult director Brian Trenchard Smith works his magic around the movie, and there is an undeniable energy and vibrancy that boosts the movie. The director surely knows how to use his imagination, and it works like a charm. The green little guy spends all the time in the big city, and there are some funny moments such as one where the leprechaun meets an Elvis impersonator. The fans of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 will enjoy watching Caroline Williams in action, and Warwick Davis continues to own the role of the leprechaun. Lee Armstrong as the female lead is a sight for sore eyes, and the audience will be treated to some gracious violence and women shedding their clothing. This film has more one-liners than the previous two, and most of them are hilarious. Watch out for the campy violence, and the dialogue gets corny as hell at times. But that is exactly why you will be watching the Leprechaun movie in the first place. So stop being a grumpy critic and enjoy this one with a few beers.
Let that be a lesson to you, lad. Always wear a prophylactic.
Leprechaun 4 in space. They have had enough of the vile little leprechaun causing havoc in the cities and quaint houses, and this time they premise the whole thing in space. Like things weren't ridiculous enough already. The story is set in the future, in the year 2096 on a remote planet. The leprechaun has courted an alien princess named Zarina because he plans to kill her and take over her home planet with time. On the other hand, the alien princess is after the leprechaun's gold, and even she plans to have him dead after the wedding. With both partners planning their nefarious strategies, a platoon of space marines interrupts their ambitions. In the fighting that ensues, the leprechaun is killed by a grenade explosion, and the space marines think that they have gotten rid of the demented creature. However, when one of them urinates on the dead body of the leprechaun, his spirit enters his body, unknown to the others. The space marines leave on their spacecraft with the injured alien princess, and during the journey, the leprechaun makes a violent entry. He finds gruesome ways to kill many of those on board, and he continues to pursue the princess the whole time. The crew also ends up transforming into a giant leprechaun after shooting him accidentally with an experimental growth ray. Finally, the last surviving space marine opens the airlock of the spacecraft, and the leprechaun is sucked into space and explodes to his demise. A bad joke stretched too far? In order to answer this question, you must first answer if you believe in the boundaries of guilty pleasure. How trashy should a movie be in order to not qualify in the league of those flicks that don't take themselves seriously? If you are lenient on this matter, Leprechaun in Space may not be as shocking as it is to many others. Indeed, the horror franchise takes things a bit too far this time. Literally so. The plot is outrageous to say the least. And apart from the versatile performance from Warwick Davis, there is hardly a redeeming quality about this movie. Yes, you might enjoy the occasional laughs, but things also get on your nerves at times.
The hell are not.
To make matters worse, the killings aren't exactly very creative, and a lack of anything unsettling can be quite a bummer. Is this a spoof of the Alien franchise with the Leprechaun and a mix of things? Well, even if that is the case, there have been better spoofs. In space, no one can hear you scream, and apparently none of those makers could hear the agonizing screams of the audience either. Jokes aside, this is probably the weakest link in the franchise, and that is saying something about the movie.
But still I see you're a big fat ass.
Leprechaun in the Hood. Finally, Leprechaun is back on Earth, and this movie finds him in Los Angeles as a statue. Mac Daddy and Slug stumble upon a room full of gold, and they find the Leprechaun statue with a medallion on its neck. When Slug accidentally removes the medallion, the Leprechaun is freed and kills him immediately. Mac Daddy somehow manages to trap the vengeful little beast once more, and we move ahead 20 years. Now, a group of wannabe rap artists find themselves at the receiving end of an audition gone wrong. Their speaker is destroyed, and one of the members named Stray Bullet manages to convince Mac Daddy, who is now a successful record producer, to make something with them. When the group refuses to change their music style, Mac Daddy refuses to go ahead with the deal. As a revenge, the group breaks into his office and steals a magic flute that belonged to the Leprechaun. The trapped monster is back again, and he is now looking for his stolen flute. Bodies keep piling up, and after loads of action and bloodshot, we are led to a shocking twist. It turns out that Mac Daddy has been taken over by the Leprechaun, who now lords over the music industry. The Green Monster conquers the music world. The first thing that was noticed was a considerable improvement in the narrative from the previous movie. We breathe a sigh of relief after realizing that this one is not half as bad as Leprechaun in Space, and Warwick Davis is at it again, entertaining the audiences with his mesmerizing acting. He balances the moments of grotesque creepiness and amusement, and he lords over the franchise and dedicates himself to the role. The problems begin elsewhere, and they are mainly concerned about the cheap production values. The special effects look like someone made them in a hurry, and the script should have done more to introduce the characters properly. Some of the previous Leprechaun movies were known for their wacky brand of dark humor, but the fun bits are largely missing from this one. This makes the narrative look monotonous, and we would have loved something out of the box in this regard. There is not a single jump scare to blow your mind, and the suspense hardly tests your attentive nature. While we wouldn't go as far as to comment that this is a horrid Leprechaun movie, it is far from the best. Maybe this is where the creators should have taken a hint and called it curtains for the franchise.
Into the bath, my pretty. I like my girls nice and clean.
Leprechaun, Back to the Hood. The movie starts with an animated prologue that explains the origins of the Leprechaun. We learn that they were made custodians of gold by a king, but after the king's death, one of the leprechauns were too corrupted. He was obsessed with the gold that he guarded, and since then, anyone trying to take his gold became his sworn enemy. Father Jacob laid his hands on the gold pile, and he wanted to build a youth center, but he died in the process. After a year, 4 friends find this huge stack of gold that had been hidden by Father Jacob. They split the treasure among themselves, and they use the gold to fulfill their fantasies. Unfortunately, they are completely oblivious of the fact that the leprechaun is back, and he is hunting them down for his gold. Finally, it takes the same old method using the 4-leaf clover and the same clever strategy to trick the leprechaun into falling into wet concrete, where he gets trapped with his gold.
You gonna get in my face? Man, give me my ball back, bitch!
Warwick Davis bids goodbye to the franchise. This was an emotional moment for the fans because Warwick Davis did not reprise his role as a leprechaun in future projects. If you have appreciated the numerous Leprechaun movies as your kind of guilty pleasure, there is no reason to hate this one. Warwick Davis shines in this role for the last time, and the story is not as terrible as some of the other Leprechaun movies. The narrative falls short on the laughs, and apart from a few sporadic, amusing moments, there isn't much to tickle your funny bone. The other members of the cast are rather pathetic, and their incompetence affects the quality of the movie. The lack of creativity in the kills continue to bother the viewers, and the bland direction leaves little room for innovation. The comedy approach could have been the highlight of this movie, and with a better script and funny jokes, it could have turned out very differently. Instead, the film opted for a darker approach, and the sheer ridiculousness of the plot ruins it for the audience. In short, this is another mediocre addition to the franchise, but not as bad as Leprechaun in Space. Watch it only if you have exhausted the better Leprechaun movies already. Leprechaun Origins. Life without Warwick Davis was going to be difficult for the Leprechaun franchise, and the effects started showing in this film itself. The movie started with a violent scene where some vicious entity is trying to kill a young couple. It gets the man and finally catches up with the young lady as well. Meanwhile, 4 American students are on a vacation in the Irish countryside. They explore a village that used to be a gold mining center, and now the population has dwindled after the gold ran out. They soon have an encounter with a monstrous creature, which they later learned is called a leprechaun. He owns all the gold, and in return for the gold that the villagers sought, they had to sacrifice 2 humans every year. The friends learn that the villagers have a practice where they sacrifice the tourists, and they realize that they must face the wrath of the leprechaun all by themselves. It turns out that there are multiple leprechauns on the prowl, and 3 of the 4 friends all fall prey to the murderous ways. The last surviving member, Sophie, manages to decapitate one of the leprechauns using a special knife, and she crosses into safety while being pursued by 3 other leprechauns. A failed series reboot attempt. The fans of the franchise had high hopes for this one, but it turned out to be a rather disappointing affair. The plot offers some originality, in the same sense that it moved away from the usual premise of the franchise. While this could have been intriguing, the makers ruined it with too many plot holes and turned the movie into a generic monster flick. Somewhere down the line, this movie picks up all the mistakes made by the previous movies in the series, and it magnifies them further. We felt the absence of the iconic Davis, and the narrative is often too dull and humor-free. Even the characters are dull, and there is not enough suspense to hold your attention for the entire duration of the movie. The orc-looking costume hardly makes the leprechaun intimidating, and even for a B-grade horror flick, the effects are pathetic. Every time the leprechaun was on screen, the camera work turned out shady, and the creature design was found to be lacking. Imagine watching a monster flick without proper shots of the monster. To sum things up, even those who have enjoyed the previous Leprechaun movies as harmless fun will find it hard to sit through the entire film. Try finding some solace in the graphic violence because there is not much else to enjoy here.
I love the smell of me gold in the morning.
Leprechaun Returns. This is the last film in the franchise as of now, and it acts as a direct sequel to the original Leprechaun movie back in 1993. The stories are connected, and the protagonist here is the daughter of the character played by Jennifer Aniston in the original movie. It has been 25 years since the event where the leprechaun was stopped and destroyed temporarily. As luck would have it, the property where it all happened now belongs to the AU sorority house of a premier college. The pot of gold is still missing, and the leprechaun is still lurking around to get his revenge. He gets the perfect opportunity when a group of students decide to spend the summer vacation in this house. When they unwittingly revive the leprechaun, he is back with vengeance, and he wants his gold back. However, the leprechaun is not going to have it easy. The ladies band together, and they are determined to get rid of the evil creature once and for all. The last laugh, not the worst end to the franchise. After the disastrous outcome of the last Leprechaun movie, we did not have much expectations from this one, but we were pleasantly surprised. Make no mistakes, this is no horror classic to remember, but it is certainly way better than some of the worst films in the franchise. Warwick Davis was offered to reprise his role for the movie, but he decided that he had enough of the character. While his presence is still missing, the film makes the viewers rejoice in gore and dark humor. Yes, the laughter is back, and that is such a relief for those who watch the Leprechaun flicks just for the goofy jokes. It is a mindless horror film with relentless gore, which is often a bit too much for the squeamish. The killing methods are quite inventive, and that is a welcome change for the monotony that had crept into the franchise. The one-liners in the script promise to laugh riot, and the non-sensual rhymes are fun to hear. The only major issue that we faced was tolerating the strange Irish accent because the guy who played the Leprechaun in this movie couldn't keep it convincing. The finale is a bit too long, and it could have been a lot more entertaining without dragging the narrative unnecessarily. Do not keep your expectations high. Prepare yourself for loads of cheesy content and you will find yourself enjoying the perfect guilty pleasure. Like we said in the beginning, these movies will do no more than just allowing you to have a good time, and your expectations should be nothing beyond that. Even we feel that the franchise overstayed its welcome, and after the absence of Warwick Davis, there was nothing much to look forward to in the last couple of movies. Steve Konstanski, the director of the last Leprechaun movie, Leprechaun Returns, has revealed that he is willing to make a sequel if the opportunity arises, and we hope that it never does. It was fun while it lasted, but as of now, even the Leprechaun fans like us are tired of the same old show over and over again. And if you like our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.